Hello everyone, Stoney here. A little while ago a friend asked me to design a relatively quick and easy costume for her kids for Halloween. So here it is. I'm building the costume on a body form, but you don't need one as long as you can get your kids to hold still for a few minutes at a time. No promises. Also, there's a lot of information that you'll need from my other videos, so if you haven't already, please check them out. We'll start by making a pattern for the chest. I'm using 200 GMS A3 paper to make the patterns as you want something that's fairly strong. Take some measurements off your model to get a rough size, and don't forget to add a bit extra for the thickness of the foam and clothing. By folding the paper in half and cutting it folded, you can make sure the pattern is symmetrical. Make the neck hole deep enough and wide enough to fit over their head and make sure there is plenty of room under their arms. You can test the pattern on your model and make any adjustments you feel are necessary. Paper is cheaper than foam, so it's better to adjust the pattern. If the paper isn't large enough for your pattern, you can tape extra pieces onto the edges. For this costume I'm using 12mm EVA foam mats that I picked up at my local hardware store. Note that I've added an extra 5cm to the length of the shoulders and under the arms. This will be trimmed off later. To make the foam look thinner, I cut a deep chamfer on the inside of the exposed edges, then sand it flat with some 60 grit sandpaper and clean it up with some 120 grit sandpaper. To shape the foam, bend it into the shape you want and use some tape to hold it in place. Use a heat gun at about 280 degrees Celsius to gently warm up the foam on both sides. With the tape removed, the foam should now hold its shape. If not, heat it up and bend it some more. This costume is for a girl, so I'm putting a curve on the waist plate to bell out over her hips. Make it deep enough to go from the belt line to about a 5cm overlap with the chest plate, and remember to add 5cm to the length so you have some material to trim later. Pin it in place and mark a line around the edges of the chest plate. This will create a reference that will help when gluing. To make the back plate, follow the same process as you did for the chest plate. The dimensions will be slightly different as the neck doesn't need to be as deep and the back of the arms don't need as much clearance for movement. The important thing is that the sizes need to match where the front and back plates meet. Remember to test the pattern on your model and make any adjustments before cutting the foam. For the rear waist plate, I'm putting a bit of extra curvature on the belt to create some extra room and putting a small kink on the tail. I'm also putting some extra initial bending on the back pieces so that I can use some heat and release some of the tension so that the front and back plates align properly. Now we're going to glue the chest plates to the waist plates. I'm using hot glue for this build as it's quicker and easier than contact cement. I've never been a huge fan of hot glue for various reasons, but after a bit of practice I got it working reasonably well. Using the reference lines we created earlier, pin the two plates in place and draw some reference lines on the inside of the plates. Spot glue them in the center and at each end, then when it's set, continue gluing them together along the entire join. You don't need much glue to create a bond, and try not to squeeze any glue out on the visible surfaces. Remember that once you glue them in place, it's very hard to change the bend of the plates, so make sure you glue them while they're in the correct shape. Now that the plates are glued together, we can trim the edges to the correct length. Tape the chest to your model and make some reference marks for the split lines. Use your existing reference lines to help make sure the split lines are symmetrical. I'm leaving an extra 2cm of length on the front shoulder straps as I plan to attach the pauldrons to the front plate. Be very careful as you are cutting through the glue as it may grab the blade. Tape the front plates back onto your model, then put the back plate in place and use the front plate to mark the split lines on the sides and shoulder. With the torso taped together, there should be just enough room for your kids to move without it binding up. If it's too big, you can trim a bit off the edges, but it's better if it's a little large, as kids have a habit of growing. With the front and back plates done, we can now mount the straps to attach them together. I'm using 35mm black nylon straps as I had some lying around, but any thickness will do. After you cut the nylon, seal the ends with a little PVA glue and let it dry. Don't use heat to fuse the ends as it will become rigid. I put a chamfer on the ends of the shoulders so the plates will open up more easily. Mark where the straps will be mounted and put a little glue at the end to hold the straps in place. You can then glue the rest of the strap without worrying that it'll move. Remember to keep the glue light so it doesn't ooze out the edges, and keep the shoulder bent into the correct shape while the glue sets. When gluing the straps to the second half, you want to leave a 5mm gap so that the two halves have plenty of room to open fully. Glue the ends of the plates into the correct position on the strap, then tape the plates together and glue the rest of the strap in place. To make the straps for the side of the torso, I'm using 4 nylon pieces about 65mm long and some 20mm velcro. Cut 4 lengths of velcro to the same width as the straps and mark where you want to mount them on each strap. Remember to leave some overhang on the strap so you can pull the velcro off easily. Typically I mount the fuzzy side of the velcro to the flexible piece and the bristly side of the velcro to the rigid piece. To help the straps sit flush with the plates, I made a 3mm recess for the bristly velcro. This was done very carefully with a craft knife and cleaned up with some 60 grit sandpaper. Alignment is critical, so make sure you measure and mark everything before you start gluing. This concludes part 1 of this series. In the next video, we will finish off the carapace with a skirt, hips, pauldrons and gorget.